Hello, everyone, and welcome to DrupalTutor Live. My name is Wayne Aker. I'm a Drupal developer and the trainer at DrupalTutor.com, where I offer training classes for all levels from beginner to advanced module development. And in this live stream, you're following along as I build the new version of DrupalTutor.com. So you get to see everything that I'll do. It's a complex Drupal 9 site that will eventually be Drupal 10. So you get to see everything step by step as I go through. If you are not already signed up for updates, you should check out DrupalTutor.com/live. There you can see all of the previous episodes in this live stream, as well as put in your email address, and then I'll send you an email every week to tell you what we're going to be working on that week, so you can decide if it's of interest to you, and if you want to watch it. Okay, so if you're watching live, the comment feature is active. So feel free to use the comment feature of YouTube if you have any questions as I go through. So today what we're doing is we're going to keep working on the drip email system that I started on last week. So last week, and let me share my screen here. Last week, we built a system that I called scheduled actions, and the scheduled action system allows us to take some particular action at a given date in the future. So in this case, we used the plugin system because we thought there might be multiple actions we might want to do, and sending emails was one of those. And so at the end of last week's session, we got it to the point where we could create one of these scheduled actions, such as this, where we would give it a date and time and an email address and a template. And it would generate an email. When we ran a drush command, it would evaluate whether or not it was past that date and time. And if it was past that date or time, then it would send an email and also mark the status completed so that it wouldn't run it again. So we got to that point where we basically have a way to schedule emails. Now, the problem is they're scheduled on a particular date and time, and they all have to be individually scheduled. So the purpose of this system was to send weekly sort of drip emails out to students as they're following along with their course. So I don't want to, if there's 10 people taking a course, I don't want to have to come in here and create 10 of these. That's what I would have to do in its current form. What I want to do is be able to say, everyone gets an email like immediately when the course starts. They get this other email 1 week after the course is begun. On week 2, they get another email, this other specific email, etc. When the course is over, they get this other email. I want to be able to schedule it in relative intervals from the start of the course, and I want it to send out to everyone for whom it's applicable, and I don't want to have to put in the specific dates. So that's the part we're going to work on today, is this relative scheduling. And so the relative scheduling is going to work. I've decided that we are going to create we have an entity type, a custom entity type that we created last week that was called the scheduled action entity type. That's what we just saw there. That's the thing that has a date and some specific action that is supposed to occur. And so we're going to create another custom entity, though, called a scheduled action rule. And the scheduled action rule is going to say that a certain type of scheduled action should be created and scheduled at a particular interval as compared to some other date that will be provided. And so in this, and so that this will allow us to generate all of the scheduled actions that we need. Now we're going to, last week we used the plugin system to create a pluggable system, an easy way to define what the behavior of these scheduled actions would be. So the only behavior we did was to have it send an email, but we said last week that other behaviors that I will need at some point will be like create a hosting account, delete the hosting account, because those things happen relative to, like, if we create the hosting account the day before the class starts, we delete it 2 weeks after. So those things need to be timed out as well, just like sending the emails. So we said at some point we'll implement those behaviors. So for a scheduled action rule, we're also going to create another plugin type. In this case, we're going to create a plugin type that will handle generating the scheduled actions. So if you have this gets a little complex, but we're going to have a scheduled action rule that just says, like, 1 week after the start, create this type of scheduled action and use this specific generator algorithm to determine what those actions are. And so in this case, the generator algorithm would say, look at all of the registrations that are for this session, and based on their start date, schedule the email for the specific date based on this relative interval to that. So this generator might be different. Like, for example, it might be that we need to schedule something relative directly to the session, or it might be that we need to do this more complicated thing, which we are going to do today, where it's give me all of the registrations that are linked to this session and then generate one for each. The fact that this algorithm needs to be different for different rules is why we're going to use the plugin system again, so that we can isolate that sort of logic for generating a different set of recipients or actions, I guess I should say, so we can break that out and make it easily pluggable, and we can create new ones whenever we need to. Okay, so let's begin. All right, so the first thing we need to do is create a new entity type. What I'm going to do first, though, I should disable this module or uninstall this module, because we're going to be making some changes, and especially when we add a new entity type, Drupal's not going to like it since we have this enabled, and then we're going to need to uninstall and reinstall. So I need to drush pm uninstall scheduled actions is the name of this module. Oh, okay. So there's content, right? We've got these scheduled actions entities here, so we have to get rid of those. We can also do that with drush entity delete scheduled actions action. Okay, so that deleted the 2 that were there. Now we should be able to uninstall it. All right, and now we can generate a new entity type. So we'll do that. We'll use drush to give us a sort of scaffold of the initial version. Drush gen entity. This will be a content entity, because there will be multiple ones, like different classes have different sets of emails that go out. So these are content. These are not configuration in the site. Okay. It's the scheduled actions module. This will be a scheduled action rule. Scheduled action rule will be the entity type ID. Base class, the base path is okay. We're not really going to look at it that way. These do need to be fieldable because we are going to have different types. And there may be some fields because, for example, we may need for the one that sends emails or generates scheduled actions to send emails, we're going to need like what email template should it use and stuff like that. So we will make it fieldable. Revisionable. Yeah, I guess. Translatable. I don't think it needs to be translatable. It will have a bundle. Doesn't need a canonical page. We can create permissions for it. It doesn't really need a label base field. I don't think. I mean, you might label it, but I don't know that it's actually necessary. So I'm going to say no. Status base field. Yes. And we'll go ahead and create it and changed. We don't need an author field, or I don't know. Did I put an author field in these other ones? I did. So maybe I'll just say yes. I don't know that we really need it, and we don't need a description. And we don't need REST configuration. Okay. So let me download the new code from the dev stack. And then let's take a look at what we have. So we have the scheduled action rule, content entity type. I think we can leave everything here as it is. Status, UID, that's fine. Okay, so we will need to add a couple of fields on here because every rule is going to need, it's going to need to store what actually, hold on, let's see. It's going to need the interval for sure. Yeah, so we're going to need an interval field. I think I created a custom interval field in a previous session on this other entity type, like session. I think session has an interval field, so we can probably just copy the configuration from there so we can get all the settings. Oh, maybe I did not. Let's see, is there one for course? Or registration? Registration must have one. Yeah, okay. So here we have a duration field. This is of type interval. This is what I was looking for. So we'll add this will be we can call the field interval. I guess that's fine. This is really the relative date. So maybe I'll just call it relative date just to be consistent with the label and so it's clear what it is. All right, so we have the relative date. And I also need to know the scheduled action type that this is going to create, but I think that I should define that as part of the, yeah, that should be part of the type. So let's go over to the scheduled action rule type. This is where we define the bundle. whatever, the bundles properties. So we just have ID and label. I think we should add a couple more here. And we did this last week. We added a couple of fields to the scheduled action type, or we added one, I think, right? We added behavior, so that we could say that this type always sent emails. Another type will do the hosting or whatever. So we need similar stuff here. In this case, we need to know what is the type of scheduled action that this creates. So like scheduled action type, which would be a string. And then we also need to know the generator. And the generator is going to be which of our plugins should we use to generate the scheduled actions from the scheduled action rule. All right, so if we do that, we also should come up to the config and change and add the schema in here. So just like last week, we added in behavior and we defined that so as a string. We need to do the same type of thing down here for the scheduled action rule type. So we just added two new fields. They're very similar. So let me just copy in behavior. This is scheduled action type. And this is generator. Okay, and then just like last week, we also need to update the form for editing the type. So last week we edited the scheduled action type form and we added the behavior here. So let's just copy this in so that when we create a new type, we can specify what the behavior of that type is. For example, send email. So we're going to need that for our two new fields on the type in the rule type form. So, so we're going to need, let's see, we need one thing that is they're both going to be select elements because, so we have, this is going to be like generator options. Generator is the most directly the same as what we did last week. So we can pretty much just copy this over and change all the words. Now we don't have the plugin written yet. So let's just comment this out temporarily. And let's just put something in here. Just so we have some option in there. And then we'll see that the form works, and then we'll come back and fix that. Okay, so we have the generator. We need the scheduled action type. So we need a list of the scheduled action types, which we can get from an entity type manager. So let's see, in order to, does this already have an entity type manager in it? Claims it does. We'll see if it works. So we need to get the storage for scheduled action type. And then we need to load all of them. So you can just call load multiple with no parameters. And that will load everything. Obviously, that's not a good idea for most entities, but for these configuration entities, there will only be a handful. And then let's see. So for each So we need to create an options array to hand to a select element, a select form element. So we can now loop through scheduled action types. One nice thing about the Drupal entity system is the configuration entities work exactly the same as content entities. So they have ID field that gives you the sort of string ID, and they have a label field. So it's pretty easy to use the same type of stuff. And then we need a select element. So let's just copy this, and this will be scheduled action type. All right, so yeah, I think that should be, oh wait, let's see what the save. I can't remember if we ended up having to do anything in the save. We did not. Okay. Oh wait, sorry, I need to look at last week's. Yeah, we did end up having to set it. Okay, so we need a line like this for each of the new so it's scheduled action type. And generator. Okay, so let's see, is there anything else that we need to change before we enable this module? I think no. Let's just try it. Okay, so now let's go over here to structure, and we should have, okay, so we have scheduled action, rule types, scheduled action types. We need to create a scheduled action type first because the scheduled action rule type needs to know which scheduled action type it is. So we'll create an email one with email behavior. And I'll leave everything else for right now. Let's just go here to scheduled action rule types. And now, okay, so scheduled action type, that part works. So you can see the one we just added for email is here. And generator, we have test. All right, I'm not going to create one now. We should create the plugin system so that we have some realistic options here. So we did create a plugin system last week. So I'm not going to go through the steps in quite as much detail as I did last week. So you can go back and watch that one, but I'm going to do basically the same things again. So it's DrupalTutor plugin manager, I think. Scheduled actions, the plugin type. What exactly did I call the plugin type last time? Let's see. So this was our behavior. And this one was a scheduled action behavior. So this is going to be a scheduled action generator. I think that's probably fine. We'll use an annotation. All right, and then I need to download the files again. Okay, so now let's go to scheduled action generator plugin manager. And there's a few things here that we're going to change. We're going to change the folder that plugins go in. So instead of scheduled action generator, it's going to be scheduled action / generator. So we'll create a new folder here, generator, and the one that was in here, we're going to move up there because I created this foo. example plugin, and we'll delete this. Okay, should just fix the namespace on that. Okay, so that's fine for this. For the plugin manager, I think that's fine. That is probably, let's check the annotation. Oh yeah, I think we have to fix something in the annotation because for the generator, yeah, it says title here, but it should be label. Okay, I think that's fine because everything else is already scaffolded out for label, so it should work. Okay, I think that's all we need. So now we can come back to the type form, the rule type form, and where we hard coded in test, we can now, so let's get our, where did we get the behavior manager? Oh, sorry. Again, that was in this one. So, right. So we need to do basically this same thing in the create method. Okay. So we need these three parts, but we need to do them for the generator over here on the rule type form. So this will be a scheduled action generator plugin manager. Same here. Okay. So now we have the generator plugin manager. Inject, oh wait, down here in the create, one more place. This should be plugin manager for scheduled action generator. And now this should work. All right. Got a typo there. Okay, so if we come back here now and we refresh, there hopefully will be a. I think I need to clear caches because it created a new service, the plugin manager. Okay, and now we have the generator. We have foo as the only possible option, and that is coming here from the foo example plugin that is here that it just generated for us. Okay, so we got the generator plugin type. So now we should be able to create a generator that generates based on the registrations to a session. That's the one we really need. So I will create a new PHP class. I'll call it registration. I'll just call it registration. We should extend the scheduled action generator plugin base. And we need the annotation. I'll just copy the annotation from this one. And we'll call this registration. And I'll call it generate by registration is the label. Or generate by registration start date. How about that? I think that's the clearest. Okay. So now I could create a new rule type called like class emails. It will generate emails based on the registration, based on relative to the registration start date. Okay, so now let's try to make an example one and try to get it to work. And then we'll sort of clean up the code a little bit and package it up once we get all that working. So I think that right now this is over here in content, scheduled action rules. This is not where it's going to live eventually, but this is where Drush puts it by default. So we will add scheduled action rule. I think I may need to go fix the form for this. Let's look at manage form display. Yeah, relative date needs to come up here to the top. And actually, I don't need to see authored on or author. Doesn't matter. Okay, so let's add a scheduled action rule that zero, well, let's see. We'll start with 10 days, let's say. And, oh wait, this doesn't, we're going to need something here. We're going to need, for this one, we're also going to need a session ID. So let's add a field to this rule type that links to a session. Should I link to a session? Let's see, do I have a dynamic one, right? Because it could potentially link to a session, or it could link to a class. So okay, and this will be actually, let me think. I think that I don't know if I want this as a dynamic entity reference. That might be too tricky in the code. So let's just do it by session right now, and then we'll figure out how to generalize it in the future so that it works on a class basis. So we'll do a regular reference. We'll just call it session. And it should link to session. Okay, it doesn't matter what type it is. All right, so we need to, let's see, we have the session and we have the interval. That should be enough. So let's just go to manage form display, make sure session is up here. And I think that's fine. Okay, do we have any sessions? Okay, we have a session, a test session with a start date of March 31st. That's fine. So let's go back over here to scheduled, add a scheduled action rule. So again, we'll do it 10 days after the start of test session. Okay, so now we need to evaluate this. And actually, we should make sure that are there any registrations? Okay, so I do have a registration for the test session. The registration has a start date as well of March 31st. So now we need something to evaluate this rule and create a scheduled action. So if it was supposed to be 10 days after the start date, then I guess we would expect it like April 9th is when we would expect the email to go out in this particular case. Okay, so let's create it. We have a drush. Last week we created a drush command to trigger the scheduled actions on their date. So let's add another drush command that will evaluate the rules and allow the rules to update or delete or create whatever scheduled actions they need to in order to be in sync with the current data. So let's, we already created a drush command file last week. And since we already have the drush command file, yeah, we created this test command, which we probably should name more properly. This should probably be scheduled actions trigger, maybe. And we'll call that trigger. This was the one that would actually send the emails on their time, on their scheduled time. Okay, so let's create another okay, so we'll evaluate the rules and let those sync up. So I'll call the scheduled actions eval rules. All right, so we need, we're going to have some similar stuff here. We're going to need the scheduled action rule storage, which I didn't do these necessarily properly. I should come back and clean this up at some point to do proper dependency injection here, but we did Drupal entity type manager, get storage, scheduled action rule. And then I need to query for all of the enabled rules. So I think that's actually the only condition. As long as it's enabled, we need to just we need to reevaluate it. So then we're going to, let's see. We need to load it. Yes, probably. So we have the rule would be scheduled action rule storage, load, rule ID. Okay, so we have the rule. Then from the rule, we can get the generator for this rule. Oh, wait, no. The generator is on the type. So I think this might work. Let's just dump this out and see if it works. So we'll clear caches and then let's try this eval rules and hope it dumps out, that it finds one rule and that its generator is registration. Okay, that did not work. Yeah, I don't think it's get key either, but we'll just check. Yeah, okay, so we may have to load the type. So we'll need something like rule type storage. And then, so the rule type is okay, so that will give us the type, and then the type. Now, can we do? No. When we get the rule type, is it actually working? Yeah, I think I had the same problem last week, didn't I? See, we loaded the type. Oh, okay. So I think it's actually just not, I've almost got it, I think. I think maybe it's just this. Let's see. Did I not set correctly? Oh yeah, it didn't set correctly. Okay, so there's a problem with my form. Let me go back to the scheduled action rule type. Yeah, see, these are null and they shouldn't be. Okay. So I need to delete this type. And then let's try to see what went wrong here. And we can compare it to what I did last week because we did get it to work last week with that definitely looks the same. Just dump out all the values, make sure they're really saving correctly. Okay, so the values are there. But if I go to, let's look at the configuration that was created by that. Yeah, it did not create the additional values. So what have I missed? Oh, maybe here. I forgot to add under config export generator and scheduled action type. I think that is the issue. So we'll clear caches. Let's delete and try this again. Okay, and let's export again. Yeah. Okay, so they're here now. I think that was the only problem. All right, so now let's delete this and create the real one again. So we'll say, I think we called it class emails. It sends emails based on registration date. And then we'll create one. Gotta fix the form again. Oh, and I need to add a session field again. Okay, so here we go, 10 days. And relative to the test session. All right, so there's that. So now let's come back to our drush command that we were evaluating before. All right, so now we have the single rule and it's using the generator type registration. So now what needs to happen is we need to write the logic that says find the registrations for this session, for the linked session. So let's go back to the drush. So we can also get the session ID, which is rule get. Oh, but actually we don't necessarily want to put the session ID here because maybe that logic is part of the generator's logic. So it should really go in the plugin. So now we have the generator. We need to hand all this over to the generator and say, do whatever you want to do with it. create and delete and update whatever scheduled actions you want, because it's the generator that's responsible for that. So our generator code is here in registration. Currently, it has no methods. We're going to need one method here that's going to be like update scheduled actions. And it's going to take a scheduled action rule. And it's not going to return anything. It's just going to go do it. So this should be part of the interface for this, for all scheduled action generators, because they all have to implement this. Then they can do whatever they want, but they have to implement this. So probably we're going to need one in here in food, just so that and we'll just have it do nothing. But here in registration generator, this is where we will need to, this is where we'll need to do the logic to find the registrations for the session. So here we can say session ID equals rule get field session target ID, and let's just dump that out. We'll use a var dump here because we're running this with Drush. So over here in the Drush command, we need the generator plugin manager. And again, I'm going to skip the dependency management for the moment. So this is plugin manager scheduled action generator. Okay, so then I need to get the generator by calling I need to create an instance of it. And then for the generator, so then this object is now a scheduled action generator interface. And now this generator, I should be able to call update scheduled actions and pass it the rule. So whatever and then that way all the logic for whatever it does is part of that generator. So let's evaluate rules now. Okay, so so I got a 1. This 1 is the session ID that I dumped out. So we don't need these anymore. Yeah, that 1 is coming from here. So I have the session ID. So now I need to get all the registrations for the session. So I don't know, this probably doesn't have an entity type manager, does it? No. So okay, so we need an entity type manager. So we'll implement container factory plugin interface, and we'll implement the create method, which needs to have like plugin equals new. And we did this last week in a similar way. So our create method needs to return this plugin. It has a parent constructor that needs this configuration plugin ID and plugin definition, but then we can add additional things on top of that. So if we need an entity type manager, we'll create one of these and let's create, we'll create getters and setters for it. And then we can call plugin set entity type manager container get entity type dot manager. All right, these probably should be protected actually. They don't need to be public methods. Okay, so now it sets the entity type manager. So now we have an entity type manager object. So down here we can have and I think, let me just double check. I think this is just registration is the entity type. Yep, just registration. So our query is let's look back at the registration entity. So because it's base field, so it's session. We also have start date and we have status. So I'm going to want ones where the status is active, and although I don't know, status could potentially be pending if I wanted to send one ahead of time. So I'll say the status has to be either pending or active. And the session has to match this session ID. Okay, so status has to be 0 or 1. And session has to be the session ID. Okay, and hopefully that finds, there is one that's already there, so hopefully that finds it. Okay, it does. It's a little confusing because they're all ID 1 because we've only created one of them, but that is it. That is the registration. So now I know all of the registrations for this. So now I need to know, now I need to make sure that there are scheduled actions for each registration. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to need to keep track of, somehow of like that this scheduled action was created by this rule and that it and what it's like some sort of unique ID. In this case, it would be the registration ID, but it might not always be the registration ID because other generators might have some other things that make each one unique. So, okay, so I think we have to go back and change the scheduled action entity. So the scheduled action entity is going to need a couple of additional base fields. They will be strings. Yeah. So let me, I think I can find an example to copy. Like sessions have a title or something, name. Yeah. So we can start with this and then just change it up. So we're going to have like rule ID. Actually, rule ID should be an entity reference. So, but we might have, let's say, rule key. That would be a string. It's definitely not required because you want to be able to create these manually. And actually, I don't necessarily want to see these by default, so we'll make them configurable, but I don't want them to show up on the form necessarily. So we have the rule key, and then I need an entity reference for to have like a UID up here. Yeah, this will be fine. For the rule ID. And let's see. The target type is scheduled action rule. And again, I don't really want it to be displayed on the form necessarily because it's not meant to be used manually. It's only meant to be used on automatically generated things. Okay, so now there's a rule ID and a rule key. So when I create these, then I'll add that in there. That way I can know if, that way I can find one if it already exists. All right, so now I'm gonna have to uninstall everything again. Let's do a drush CEX because that way I won't have to redo all these fields. I'll just import again because I'm going to have to drush entity delete scheduled action rule and the schedule. I don't think there are any scheduled actions. Yeah, so drush PM uninstall scheduled actions. All right, so now I can re-enable it and so that it gets all of the base fields. And now if I drush CIM, it should get my types back. And the configured fields that I had before should come back. All right, now the only thing I do need to do is I will have lost my scheduled rule. So if I add a new rule here, 10 days to the test session. Okay, so back here in generator registration, when I ran the drush command, I got the registration. So now I need to look for, let's just create one first, and then we'll add the piece to look for the existing one. So based on this, I need to create a scheduled action that's 10 days after the start date of this registration. So all right, so there's the, I know I have the registration object. So I can say, Not sure what the not sure what type of thing this is going to end up being. Okay, so if I do it that way, then I just get the date that is as a string. That's fine. So, and then I do need the interval, which is in the rule, and it was relative date. And let's see what format that's coming out in. Okay, so that has interval and period. All right. So I think we can do something like, so the relative start date or the relative trigger date, let's say, well, let's just say trigger date for this action should be, if I do string to time, wait, I should use actually, because these are in, want to make sure the time zone stuff and everything is clear. So is correct rather. Okay, so now the start date is a Drupal date time object. And now I want to do string to time. Relative date 0 interval space. Actually, if I get this as a, there's an interval item. Does it actually have some helper methods for this? Relative date. Yeah, look at that. Apply interval, which I believe is probably what I want. Let's just see. Applies an interval to a date object. Okay, I think that that's what I want. So we have the relative date. So I think this maybe is the trigger date. Let's see. Okay, that's a huge. Okay, I may have to kill this session and go back. Okay, let's, all right, so this, what does this actually return? This returns in, it actually doesn't say what it returns. Or maybe it doesn't return anything, it just applies it to the date. So just so I don't corrupt that initial, the original sort of start date, I'm going to create a copy of it basically. And then if I do something like trigger date, format, Y, AMD, hopefully that will keep it from dumping like crazy. Nope. Oh, because I'm dumping it up here. That's the problem. Okay. So that does not appear to have worked. Oh, wait. Not relative. Oh, wait, hold on. This was supposed to be, yeah, relative date, apply the interval on this. So maybe it does return. It's just not noted. Let's see. Nope, does not return. So why doesn't this work? Yeah, applying the interval just doesn't seem to do anything. Oh, because this is why. Because this is creating a new thing. Okay, hold on. This has to be a PHP, not a Drupal datetime. But I have to do that up here because this is creating a new instance right here, and then it's doesn't have a, it's not actually the same variable. Okay, I think that should work. Yes. Okay, so it moves it from, let's get the time in here because I think it's shifted by 4 hours or whatever for UTC time zone, or 5 hours maybe now. Right. So it is, all right, so that is moving it 10 days later. So that's working. Okay, so now we have the trigger date. So we can save the scheduled action. So we're going to need, going to need a storage, scheduled action, storage, create. Okay. Now the thing is, what scheduled action in this case needs yeah, I need to redo this because I think I lost this at some point, but it needs an this for emails, it needs an email template and the user ID that it should send it to, or the email address. So let's go ahead and add the references. And then we'll say like a reference to a user. We'll say recipient user. All right. So now the thing is, I got to think about this because we don't really, like, this generator shouldn't have to know what the shouldn't have to know like about templates or users. That's actually part of the scheduled action behavior. So I need to think about that. But in the meantime, let's just hard code it because we're going to run out of time here. And then we'll think about it and we'll figure over the next week and we'll clean it up next week. Okay, so I know the scheduled action type, which is from the rule get, oh wait, no, the scheduled action type is on it's on the scheduled action rule type. All right, before we do this part, let's comment this out a second. Just make sure we can get the correct stuff here. So we need, this needs to load rule bundle. And then the scheduled action type should be that's a property of the rule type. All right, let's just make sure that we get the right thing here. Yes. Okay, so that is, we got that. So now we can come down here and we will create scheduled action type. So we'll create a new scheduled action. And in this case, I'm just going to hard code these for now. Field template should come from the rule. So did I add those in here? Scheduled action rule type, manage fields. I have the session. I should also have the template here. And I don't need the registration's user ID because that I can get. So I don't need to actually I won't be hard coding the user ID. But the template does need to be coded. So this will come from rule get field template target ID. And then what was the other field in scheduled action types? Recipient user. This will be the registration user ID, target ID. And then a scheduled action also has a scheduled date, which is a date time. So let's check out where I was. Okay, here. As a scheduled date. So this is the relative date. Or sorry, the trigger date. All right. And is there anything else that a scheduled action needs? Oh, it needs a status. We'll say it's pending by default. And so we can set the rule ID and the rule key. So the rule ID is this rule that generated it. And the rule key in this case will be the registration's ID. Because, oh wait, hold on. Right, because this rule can only create one email. So yes, this is fine. So between this rule and this registration, I think we've uniquely identified it. All right, so if we do that and we save, let's see, I don't think there are any scheduled actions now. Let's just double check. Okay, no scheduled actions. Let's run it. Missing bundle entity type for scheduled action. What is it called? Oh, bundle's called bundle, not type. Okay, so now if I look at scheduled actions, it created one. And, oh wait, that's the author on date. That's not what I care about. I'm not seeing all the fields here. I need to go to manage form display, bring the status, the scheduled date. And just for right now, at least, let's bring the rule ID and the rule unique key out. We don't need to see authored on an author. Yep. So let's do that. Now let's look at the edit form so we can see everything. Okay, so the scheduled date is time zone is off. Something screwed up with the time zone there. The template did not get copied over. The recipient user did though. The rule ID and the unique key did get copied over, but the template did not. So if I just dump that out, I think you can do, that should be the correct. Oh wait, no. Oh, maybe I didn't set it. Yeah, okay. I didn't set it, that's why. So I needed to send the test email. Okay, so the code was correct. I just didn't set the data correct. So let's go in here to scheduled actions. Those are the two I created already. Let's just, because it's not syncing up yet, so it'll just keep creating extra ones. Okay, so it did copy it over. Okay, the last problem I have here is this date is not correct. It's because the registration time was like midnight. So like, how did this get? It's like it did it. So let's just see what exactly it's putting in there. So this is what it's putting in. But that, the real time should be the 10th, exactly at midnight. So this is correctly in UTC, but somehow it's shifting it again or something. I mean, if it goes to 4 p.m., it's subtracting another 4 hours. So then this, maybe right here. I create from timestamp. Maybe because I didn't set the timestamp of the trigger date. So date time zone. Okay, let's see what that does. Okay, so that puts it exactly on time, which maybe is going to work actually. Because yeah, I think that's correct. Because when you have the T in here, that's saying this is UTC time. And so it's UTC time is, oh wait, no, UTC time should be 20. Okay, maybe create from timestamp is not what I want. Create from daytime. All right. I think I might call it a day. We're almost there. I got to figure out this daytime thing. I don't have it. The sequence is just something about how I'm manipulating this date. Is all it is it's just off the daytime. So, but I think that's good enough for today. We have something that can generate these. I'll fix the daytime. I'll figure out exactly what I need to do. And then next week, we will continue on this. And so I'll make it, right now it's just creating a bunch of them, which it shouldn't. It should only create one for each registration. So we'll add the code to cause it to synchronize, to look for an existing one, and then update it if necessary, or add a new one. And also it should delete ones. Like if there's one there that doesn't exist anymore, like if somebody cancels their registration, then it needs to take it off. So so we'll have that. We'll add all that. And then the final step will be I want to push a lot of this processing into the queue system so that it can run in the background. So we'll continue on that next week, probably. Thanks again for watching. Remember that if you want to watch all of the recordings or sign up for updates of what I'll be doing each week on this on DrupalTutor Live, then go to DrupalTutor.com/live and put in your email address there, and you'll get an email from me every week telling you what we're going to do. So thanks again for joining the session, and I hope to see you again or talk to you again in a future session.